Good afternoon, everyone. I see a few people still joining in. We'll start like in 20 seconds or so. We'll just let a few more people join in. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? It's a couple minutes past 1. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to cover the topics that we have today and have time for questions and answers related to our APCAW office hours. Ella has put up on the screen just some housekeeping notes here. If you can put yourself on mute, that would be great. And if you have questions, you can add those to the chat space. You'll also have the ability to raise your hand and ask a question too as the program goes on. My name is John Daigle, a citizen member of the Penobscot Nation and director of the APCAW, which is Ash Protection Collaboration across Wabanakik. And I'm so glad to have you join today. It's nice seeing some familiar faces and names that are joined today. And hopefully, I think there's a few new uh, names or faces too that I haven't seen before. So that's great. Ella, do you want to go to the next slide? So I just have a couple updates to share with you. And Ella's actually going to be moderating the session today. But importantly, Ella McDonnell, who's done such a fantastic job organizing our webinars and outreach with everyone, has as part of her master's thesis research an evaluation of our outreach efforts over the past year. For those of you that may have attended one or more of our webinars or attended our in-person training sessions, we have a short survey that we want to send out to you that will be coming to you via Ella in early January. And I'm hoping that all of you will take that survey. And if you know others who have attended the webinars in the past, encourage them to take that evaluation. It'll be really, really helpful to us as we move forward in the coming year. I will have other announcements on our APCAW website with things going on, but coming up soon after in the new year, we're actually going to be presenting down at the Scarborough Public Library at 4 p.m. on some of our efforts. And we can have more details on our website if you'd like to join that event in Southern Maine. And later in the year, we'll be presenting at the Maine Land Trust network meeting like we did last year and do an inventory and seed collection workshop. That's going to be on April 12th. And also what's exciting, we're in the planning stages of planning a brown ash colloquium that's going to take place next fall. And we're still working out the specific dates to align it so that we hopefully don't overlap with other major conferences in the fall, and just looking at the room availability here at the University of Maine. But it's going to be a really important meeting where we're hoping to bring in some of the latest researchers and others doing outreach and efforts around brown ash work. And I think that will be a really informative meeting, and we'll have updates on our website as that's being developed, and let you know also who we have coming to present at the meeting. And so that should be really exciting to happen next fall. So with that, I want to hand it over to Ella, who's worked with many of you who are coming up speaking today. And thank you again, Ella, for really taking a leadership role here in organizing the office hour event. I think we've got some great presentations, and I'm hoping we can have some discussion here related to the presentation. So Ella, it's all yours.
Thanks, John, and thanks everybody for coming out today. After a year of programming, I think we just really wanted to get everybody together, share some updates about ash protection efforts across the whole region. Really excited to have folks coming to the session today from Canada as well as Maine. And I hope that there are folks in New Hampshire and Vermont, other places across the region of Wabanakig. And we have a great lineup of speakers, and we really hope that them sharing will inspire collaboration or further ash protection efforts. And we also are going to have some unstructured time at the end to hear from you if you all have ash protection updates that you want to share, or if you have any questions you'd like to ask. We have a lot of experts in the room today, so hopefully we can have some good discussion. And our hope at APCAW is really just to create space to help support you as you engage in ash protection efforts. Whether you're a private landowner, a conservation staff, a forester, state employee, or a basket maker. So yeah, we've got a great lineup of speakers. I'm gonna introduce each of them, and they're each gonna speak for about 5 to 7 minutes. And first we have Mike Parisio. Mike, are you on the call?
I am here.
Okay, great. And Mike's a forest entomologist at the Maine Forest Service, and he's going to speak about some of the recent policy updates, quarantine changes. Let me pull up your slides, Mike. 1 second. All right. And just let me know when you want me to advance.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Alice. Yeah, thanks, Alice. Thanks, John, and everybody in APCAW for continuing to invite Maine Forest Service back to all of these APCAW events. It's great to see all of you and keep in touch this way. So yeah, what I'm going to do today is just give a quick update of some of the recent regulatory changes. So as you're all probably aware, EAB is a moving target in Maine, so through all our monitoring efforts, we're continually adding positive points to these maps, unfortunately, but that is kind of the inevitability of it all. So I'm going to start with the regulatory area in northern Maine. So if you take a look, both this slide and the next one will have two side-by-side maps. So on the left there, this is what the state of Maine looks like as a whole in terms of regulated areas. So these areas in blue are the regulated areas. The areas still in white are non-regulated areas. So Maine Forest Service enforces quarantines that prohibit the movement of regulated articles from those regulated areas in blue into the non-regulated areas in white there. So that's where the ash resource still exists that we're trying to protect. And regulated articles are pretty self-explanatory, but basically for emerald ash borer, it's anything that kind of represents a risk for harboring emerald ash borer. So, mostly, this is forestry products like logs and firewood are kind of our biggest two things in the EAB realm, but there certainly are some others. But anyways, long story short, if you take a look at the map on the right there, that's what the current situation looks like for northern Maine. So EAB was detected in northern Maine in 2018, just like southern Maine. But in northern Maine, it's progressed a whole lot slower. So we have a pretty stable situation up there. And it's mostly just local spread at this point. So this regulated area hasn't changed much. We did pick up a couple towns just to kind of tidy things up there in the latest iteration of the regulatory boundary. So, and that just went into place last week. So I know folks have probably seen a lot of versions of these maps, but these are up to date as of December 1, and the rules actually hit the books just last week. So, so we did pick up some recent positive points. One's in Grand Isle, so that's a town that already had EAB in it, and again, that's just local spread. We did also find that furthest south point in Sear Plantation, and that was just the other week through our girdle trap tree monitoring program. So again, some small predictable jumps in northern Maine. But again, this regulatory zone is kind of holding steady. So you can click to the next slide, Ella. So the southern Maine situation is a little different. Unfortunately, we have some more rapid spread, and we've got some satellite infestations that have presumably been caused by some human spread of EABs. So southern Maine, York and Cumberland County have been infested since the beginning. Since we detected EAB in 2018, and again, a lot of those clustered points are natural spread. But if you take a look further north in this, the map on the right there, we had some notable jumps. Last year, EAB jumped to Lewis and Auburn, and then pretty much dead central in that blue zone is the Waterville Oakland detection. And then more recently in 2023, so late last winter, we had jumps like up to Andover there in northern Oxford County. And then, most significant here is Newport and Corona. So that's the point to the furthest northeast on that map on the right. So again, we had an emergency order in place. An emergency order is basically a temporary quarantine zone while the rulemaking can happen. And then we finally gotten through the rulemaking process. So that rulemaking process involves public comments. So this is what folks wanted these boundaries to look like. They were overwhelmingly in favor of maintaining emerald ash borer regulations in Maine, but they did want some changes. So, these boundaries that are currently the quarantine zone are a little bit different than the previous emergency order area, most notably in Franklin and Somerset counties. That used to be a straight line across, but you can see it dips there. And by doing that, we kind of protect some of that ash resource. And I didn't mention it before, but basically all the green shading is the basal area of ash in Maine. So you can see there's quite a bit of resource there. And with that, I'll jump to the next slide as well. So speaking of that resource, again, if you look at the maps, that basal area, so, the volume of ash on the landscape is always shown in that green hatching there. So a lot of that is buried up in the regulated zone in blue now, but you can see, again, Franklin, Somerset County, a lot of ash, and then continuing northeast across the state up to Aroostook County. There's a lot of ash in Maine. So from a statewide standpoint of a super forested state, it's only 2% of our trees. But it is a significant resource out there. Many of you that have spent time in the forest know that, you'll have areas that are, almost exclusively ash. And I know folks will speak about the importance of the brown ash resource in this meeting and throughout, so I don't have to really harp on that too much. You're well aware of not just, volume's not the only thing that matters here. Obviously, the cultural significance of brown ash and that resource throughout Maine is very important. So with this latest change, now about 70% of Maine's ash is in a regulated zone. So again, that recent expansion of that southern Maine regulated area did swallow up quite a bit of that area. But it's important that folks understand when they're looking at these maps, just because these areas are regulated in blue, these are certainly not 100% infested. You saw those points on the zoomed in maps. Those are the areas where we have emerald ash borer. But again, outside of the regulated area, we presume is EAB free, and most of the areas inside of these regulated areas is also EAB free. So a lot of ash to protect, and we just want to make sure that we do the best job protecting it for the longest period of time while we learn how to deal with this. So, and that's all I have. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate it. It's really helpful to see the policy changes. Unfortunate about the new detections too, but thankfully the Forest Service is also introducing some solutions, and Colleen is here to talk about the biological control that the Forest Service is also introducing. Colleen is a forest entomologist with the Forest Service, and I'll hand it over to you, Colleen.
Okay. So when I talk about biological control, I do want to just mention woodpeckers, because early on in an infestation, the woodpeckers can cause a lot of mortality and eat a lot of emerald ash borer. However, but because woodpeckers are general predators and they eat a lot of different species of insects, they can't actually control. They don't have the ability to control emerald ash borer. And especially as EAB populations rise and rise, they just can't keep up with them. However, early on in an infestation, they do a really good job. And they're also a good way of helping us find emerald ash borer, because we can see the woodpecker feeding on the trees in the winter in particular. So next slide. So we have been releasing 3 different species of tiny little parasites. They're wasps, but they're not the stinging kind of wasps. They can't sting anything other than emerald ash borer. They do feed very specifically on emerald ash borer. They will not attack our native species of insects. And you can see, how big they are compared to an emerald ash borer, which is only a fraction of an inch long. These things are pretty tiny. So next slide. So this is Obius agrilli, which is an egg parasitoid. And if you can click again, here you can see it on the edge of about a 1-inch diameter cap, and then zoomed right in, you can see how tiny this is. This feed or parasitizes the eggs of EAB. Next slide. This is Tetrascus platypinisi, and unfortunately, none of these things have English names. They're just Latin names. It's a little hard to see, but on the left-hand picture with my fingernail in the picture, you can see above it there is a small wasp, and then there's a blow up on the right-hand side. This is a larval parasitoid, and tends to work well because it's fairly small and has a small ovipositor, a very short ovipositor. It tends to work better on younger trees with their thinner bark. And then the next slide. Oh, yeah, thanks. And this is Spathius gallinae, which is also a larval parasitoid, but it has a much longer ovipositor. And you can sort of see that there in the picture as well. Does better on older trees and is able to, because it's able to lay its eggs through slightly thicker bark. And so all 3 of these, I guess you can go to the next slide. All 3 of these insects have been released in other states other than Maine. For a number of years in Maine, we're just starting to release them. We've released them in about 14 sites throughout Maine. The idea is hopefully eventually they will spread throughout the state. But that's going to be a fairly long-term solution. These insects are not likely to, in fact, they almost definitely will not protect the trees that are standing now. Those trees will probably die because we're releasing these by the hundreds and thousands, and there are millions of emerald ash borer out there. But as a lot of the trees that are standing there die and the emerald ash borer population starts to drop, that's when we hope that these will come into their own. And there is evidence in other states that have been doing this a lot longer than we have, that in the aftermath forest, the next generation of trees that grow up, that they can be protected by these parasitoids. So this is something we're doing for the long term. And we will see what happens. And I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Colleen. I'm curious, how many sites in Maine has the wasp been released at so far?
So we've 14 so far that we've released, and then we've got a few more that we're hoping to get approved for next year. So yeah, it's each site is just sort of a drop in the bucket, but we choose them carefully so that there's enough ash throughout the forest that as EAB spreads, the parasites can also spread and follow the EAB. And eventually the hope is that they will blanket the state, but that's going to take a lot of time.
Great. Thank you so much. So now we're going to shift sort of from the policy state level to more organizations doing work in communities. And I'd like to welcome in Elena Sparrow and any other WAYS representatives. Elena is the WAYS ecologist. So she's out in ecosystem supporting tribal youth as they learn science. And Waze has been doing a lot of inventory on tribal lands as well as seed collection. So I'm gonna hand it over to Elena to talk about Waze's work.
Yeah, hello, and thank you everyone. Yeah, so Waze has been helping with Penobscot Nation, Holton Band of Maliseets, and Aroostook Band of Mi'kmaq uh with their brown ash surveying and mapping. And it's mainly been a team of myself, Stephen Phillips, Jennifer Isherwood, Benjamin Collette, Wombley Martinez, and other folks have joined us as well. But we've kind of stayed in that kind of size of a crew, doing either meander surveys, which is essentially just walking through the managed lands looking for brown ash, or looking for brown ash uh, circumstantially when we're doing forest inventory, on a like for all of the forest, and noting brown ash when we encounter it. So this is a picture of Stephen putting a flag on one brown ash tree we found in a really nice stand of them. If you could click to the next one, please. And we've been continuing this work even when after leaf fall. And here, this is a picture of us doing inventory for up in Aroostook, and kind of using that as an alternative method for brown ash surveying. And if you could go to the next one, please. And then we've been really keeping our eyes peeled for trees bearing seed. As a lot of people might know, the seed year was really last year, I believe, but we found a few trees with seed, and with the help of APCAW, we've been able to collect some of that seed. But that's another thing that we're really looking out for when we're doing these surveys, is marking either trees with seed on them, or trees that have the remnants of the female flowers, and so could potentially be a seed bearing tree in the future. And so, to go into a little more detail of how we make these maps, and then as like a process of recording where all the brown ash is, so that later we can hopefully go in and do some more protective measures on them. This is just a fake map. It's not any real managed parcel, but it's just as an example. We'll start with just the parcel area, which is this red outline. You oftentimes parcels will have been previously inventoried for some other forestry reason, and so we have a sense of maybe where stands of hardwood trees are, or even just using satellite imagery. In the season when the leaf fall has happened, you can kind of delineate that just from aerial imagery. And sometimes local people, basket makers, the tribal foresters will also have an idea of kind of general areas where brown ash can be found. And so we use both like the where hardwood areas are, and those known areas, and then also the knowledge of the conditions that brown ash like, of being in having its feet wet and being near rivers often, was another thing we use to kind of narrow down where to go first on these really big parcels. So if you could press the next slide. Yeah, this is another example of looking at the topography and like the water conditions as a way to kind of hone in on what areas to look for brown ash in. And then the next slide, please. And this is kind of what a final map would look like from a meander survey. The dashed line it indicates like kind of the meandering path we took, exploring the different areas we thought might have brown ash, and then the different points are individual trees with different coloring and annotations to indicate whether they have seed, whether they're younger, or whether they might be potentially a good basket tree. And so that's just one example. It does vary, like for when we're inventorying by plot, the way we collect data is different. And then sometimes instead of putting points for individual trees, the stand is so big, we just delineate the outline of it rather than marking every single tree. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you. I don't Stephen and Jen are also here, but I don't know if they're able to add anything or would like to add anything.
Great job, Elena.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah. Did I miss anything? I'm sure.
No, it was perfect. It was great.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for sharing. I think this example of a map could be helpful for organizations like land trusts or state agencies to just see where seed is at for future seed collection and silvicultural management. So it's awesome to see. Thanks, Elena. Next.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Next, I'm gonna turn it over to Maggie and Abigail at Gulf of Maine Research Institute. Abigail is the community science coordinator, and she helped launch an ash protection launch challenge with students for the past few months, and they collected a lot of really great data. So I'm going to turn it over to them to talk about that effort.
Great. Thank you so much, Ella. This is really exciting to be part of this conversation. So just a teeny bit of background, just to sort of frame what we were doing this fall. So for the past maybe 10 to 15 years on the Gulf of Maine Research Institute education team, we've been working to connect youth with active research and stewardship efforts around local ecosystems and how they're changing. And this is all part of our effort to kind of help youth connect to natural spaces around them and be part of observing and understanding and responding to changes in local ecosystems and building scientific inquiry skills and data skills. We also have, through this work, been working to get data, important data to local scientists and resource managers so that youth can, be part of actual stewardship efforts. And we do most of this work through interacting with teachers, providing teachers resources or informal educators, and doing workshops with teachers and informal educators. And so when we learned about this collaboration and the need for ash inventory, we thought this was a really great matchup of skills and resources and needs. So that led us to our ash protection challenge.
If you go to the next slide. Thanks. So this fall we launched this ash protection community science challenge, and we utilized a network of both formal and informal educators to get youth out collecting data on ash trees and signs of emerald ash borer. So we had about 27 educators sign up all across the state of Maine, as you can see from that map. And we did see data submission from about 4 classes, but we know that there were a ton of classes at least learning about ash trees, learning about emerald ash borer, and preparing to collect data either the next field season or sometime in the future. So just a bit about the structure. It began with a virtual launch meeting where those who signed up could join a call with some of our project leads. So we had Ella join us from APCAW, as well as Gary Fish, Maine State horticulturist, and Colleen Tierling, we just heard speak. And so this was a chance for students to build background on why they're collecting the data, what we already know, what we want to learn more about. And they were able to ask questions or send in questions if they couldn't make it. And it was just a really great way for students to connect with the experts. So following that launch, classroom teachers then continued to build background with their students, including how to identify ash trees, what the cultural and environmental importance of ash trees are, and how to look for the signs of emerald ash borer. And this prepared them for data collection. So they followed a protocol based on the APCAW's ash observation data sheet, and submitted it to me, and then I sent that over to the APCAW team. So then at the end, we concluded in November with a wrap-up meeting where we had the same group of project leads come on, same group of students join, and they were able to share out their observations and what they learned and any questions that they had, and voice those curiosities, and really just connect both between classrooms and just with experts in the field who are working on ash protection, and create that kind of community. So there was really great conversation and lots of questions and curiosities, and it's just really fun to hear students get excited about this work as well. Next slide.
So to get that work off the ground, to sort of prepare our educators for the Ash Protection Challenge, we compiled a lot of curriculum resources. We developed some curriculum resources that teachers and educators could take into their classroom or their education spaces. Things around the importance of ash, the threat of emerald ash borer, with the help of Colleen and Gary on this call, and Tyler Everett as well. We created some identification resources that youth could take out into the field. So ash trees in general, ash species identification, and emerald ash borer identification. And then we gathered educators together to go out into the field and go through the protocols, and also just to try out some of the classroom resources and build background knowledge together. So we had a couple different in-person sort of workshop sessions with teachers in the summer and then in the fall as well.
Great, next slide. So I can kind of tee this up.
It just took me to the online Just Do It facilitator.
Oh no, I'm sorry, we put links in there.
That works. All right, so I just wanted to run through a few fun examples that I received from classrooms. So this is from Sacapee Valley Middle School, which is in Hiram, Maine. And this is in the hallway of one of their buildings. And it was just fun to see all the resources put up together. And then they did an exercise with their students where they had the students draw different types of trees, ash trees. They're also working on hemlock and hemlock woolly adelgid. So they were able to draw those and kind of talk about both the cultural and ecological importance through that art, which they were saying, like, you know, some students really loved to get a bit artistic there. Great, next slide. So another example was from the Friends School of Portland. So I was able to actually go out with them one of the days to collect data, but they worked really closely with the Falmouth Land Trust and Wild Seed Project to survey for ash. So they followed through that protocol, and they went out and they actually created a map with the Falmouth Land Trust to pinpoint where different ash trees were, and they tagged them in the forest using that little red rope that you can see there. So they're hoping to continue to do this survey with future classes. And they also connected with King Middle School, which is also in Portland. And so that class is going to go out and repeat this survey. And so it's a great way to just teach some peer review and compare observations and make sure that they're getting that accurate data. Yeah, next slide.
So just in terms of next steps, we're really excited to keep learning from this network and keep building relationships and expanding this collaboration and pulling in. We're excited to pull in more teachers and educators as well. And after our initial season of trial with some of the resources that we developed, we're going to go back and review and refine some of these resources and you know, keep building on that work. But mostly we're really excited to kind of stay in touch with this network and keep track of just the most meaningful ways for youth to contribute to ash protection, whether that's additional ash inventory or seed collection, or in new directions. We're just happy to continue learning and adjusting. So thanks for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Maggie and Abigail. It was really, really inspiring to see when we came on to the Zoom call, to see all the kids really engaged in asking questions about ash. And it's exciting that you guys are getting them out into the forest so early on to build a relationship with ash. So thanks for all the work that you're doing, and looking forward to continuing working together on that. Next, I wanted to bring up Sammy Wolf, who has been doing some really great work with Scarborough Land Trust. Sammy signed up as one of the volunteers for APCAW to commit volunteer hours protecting ash. And she's the stewardship director at Scarborough Land Trust. And she's been doing a number of things, and I wanted to bring her up to talk about what she's been doing. So Sammy, if you're here.
I'm here. Thank you, Ella. And just a general thanks to everyone involved with APCAW. This is a huge undertaking, and the good work is clearly showing up in the communities and around the state and around the greater region. So glad that Scarborough Land Trust can contribute to the effort. So I went to the APCAW in-person ash tree identification and seed collection training in mid-September this year. It was fantastic training. I learned a lot. It was very clear. And as soon as I got back from that, I emailed my volunteers and said, this is something I want us to get out and do. And I wanted to train my 200 volunteers to go out into our preserves. We have about 1,600 acres of preserved and conserved land in Scarborough, protected by the Land Trust. And I wanted to show our volunteers how they could get involved in this effort on the ground. So I went out, I collected and purchased materials to make 2 of the seed collection kits that I can loan out to folks in my volunteer network and beyond. And then we chose a lovely day near the end of September. It was a beautiful, warm day. The sun was setting quickly, so we had to get out there and look as much as we could before the sun went down. And I had several adults show up for this volunteer training that evening, and I also had a family show up, which was really great. The family was really enthusiastic, and it was very cool to see 3 generations of people working together to learn how to identify and collect seeds. So this little map here that you see on the screen is where we were able to find some stands of ash trees that evening on the western part of Fuller Farm. I still need to go and collect GPS data for the rest of Fuller Farm, but we were very happy to find quite a few stands there. That area is pretty wet. There's wet meadow, and the trails that you see go around the edge of that wet meadow, and so there are ash trees and other, forest ecology in that area. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find or collect any seeds that day, and after lamenting that to folks at APCAW, I was reassured that it just wasn't a seed year, especially not in southern Maine. So, oh well, but now we know where to look. Hopefully there'll be some next year or in the coming years, maybe, fingers crossed. Maybe I'm being optimistic. But it was a great learning experience for those volunteers. Many of them very enthusiastically said that they would go out and look on the rest of our preserves and in other forested areas that they have access to. And to that point, I actually enlisted the help of our hunting community in Scarborough. We allow hunting on some of our larger preserves. And because those hunters are generally walking off trail, they can do what Elena was talking about and do a meandering survey to an extent as they're out there. And I have been receiving data points from some hunters. I've been receiving some GPS locations of ash tree stands both at Fuller Farm and at other large preserves of ours, mostly in the western part of town. So that's been really nice. It's been a great way for folks who are already out in the woods there to help us locate ash stands and sort of do a species inventory. It's been lovely. I've had a lot of enthusiastic responses from my volunteer base. And I've also been in contact with our library. Our library in Scarborough unfortunately cut down some ash trees that were sort of the welcoming trees in the parking lot. And they asked if we could say something about what's happening with EAB and with our ash trees. And now we have this fantastic event coming up on the 11th of January, and very happily members of APCAW, Tyler, Ella, and Emily, and our friends from Wild Seed are going to be coming in and sharing some knowledge and reassuring some community members in Scarborough that all hope is not lost. So again, thank you for the incredible work you do, and very happy to be part of it, and very happy and interested to connect with other organizations represented here today to see how we can bolster the effort. Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. It's such a great story to hear about community organizing to protect ash. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And last but definitely not least, I wanted to introduce Donnie McPhee, who's joining us from Fredericton, New Brunswick today, all the way up north of the border in Canada. And Donnie is the coordinator of the National Tree Seed Center of Canada. And they're doing some really exciting work to collect seed all across the region with over 100 different communities and store it. So I wanted to bring Donnie in to tell us a little bit about his work in order to inspire our efforts in Maine and potentially find more places to store seed. So Donnie.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Really nice to be invited and to meet you south of the border. I'm actually from the Boston area myself, but find myself in Canada right now. So the National Tree Seed Center of Canada, our goal really is conservation of forest genetic resources. You can switch to the next slide. So we work with the provinces, our national and provincial park systems, NGOs, Indigenous communities, research organizations, other federal departments. So basically, we kind of a little bit different of how things work in the States. We're kind of like not the top of the pyramid, I wouldn't say that, but my role is to coordinate with anybody who's doing conservation work with any of our 700 tree and shrub species that are native to our country. We can go to the next slide. And in Canada, again, so we have about 700 trees and shrubs that are part of our mandate, but about 234 tree species. And a new report that just came out in Canada shows about a quarter of those species. So black ash, one of the things a couple of the people before me had mentioned, well, black ash wasn't in seed this year. We're hoping for next year. So we have sort of priority species, and we can probably go to the next slide, which shows sort of some of the work that we're doing with black ash. But black ash really only comes into heavy bumper crop seed years every 7 to 9 years. So what do you do in those other years? Well, you focus on other species, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But for black ash right now, our last bumper crop year was 2019. And we tend to only collect when it's a bumper crop year. And in Canada, in 2019, it was the entire range that you're seeing on the screen there. That entire range was in seed in 2017. I might have said 19 earlier. It was 2019. Sorry, right before the pandemic. So this map sort of shows we work on an eco district level. So in Canada, there's about 1,000 eco districts, 700 species. So for black ash, this is where black ash exists. The dark green would show that we have what we believe is the genetic diversity of the species in conservation. So that would mean we have 15 to 20 single tree collections spread out at least 100 meters apart throughout that range with about 5,000 viable seed in storage. And it's placed in our facility here. Our facility is much like the facility the US would have with Christine Walters with the USDA in Fort Collins, and collaborating with like Victor Vankis and his group down in Rye Branch with the US Forest Service. So those were the people I kind of worked with most down there. Yes, but you can see from the map, a lot of that was filled in 2019. We started in 2004, but since 2004, when we realized emerald ash borer was coming and we had to start our collections, we've only had 3 bumper crop years to get out there and get collections. So the other little dots, you see the white dots, I don't have a pointer, but down in southern Ontario, that part of the range, it's already too late. There's nothing left. So those white dots are sort of where emerald ash borer is. So you'll see in the Maritimes where I'm located, and on some of the maps that were shown earlier, like right up to the Maine New Brunswick border, there was some sites with emerald ash borer, but that'll be our priority years next time it comes into seed. We can go to the next map. And this just sort of highlights again a little closer to the group we're talking with. We're making seed collections, but on years where there isn't seed, we're making DNA collections, filling in some of those gaps. And we also, so currently we have 720 individual collections from across the range. 600 of those actually, Jill Hamilton and Melissa Lahar from Penn State. We're working on a project with them and Natalie Isabel, where either the seed or DNA samples are actually at Penn State right now, part of a large genetic diversity study, and there'll actually be some common garden experiments put out with those. You can go to next slide. Yeah, so as I mentioned, one of our biggest collaborators with collecting black ash are Indigenous communities across the country. So we have about 600 Indigenous communities in Canada. But one of our biggest issues is, so we specialize in training. So we run a certified seed collecting course. And then we actually run another course here at our facility where communities come and they can learn, once they do collect seed, well, how do you process, test, and store it for down the road when we really need it to reestablish populations. But those years where there isn't black ash, we really found we're doing a lot of training that was going to waste. So we just started asking communities, well, what are other species that you're interested in? And inevitably the answer is we're interested in everything. So we start filling the gaps in those eco-districts across the country. And we can go to the next slide, with communities. So again, the whole program really was funded being reactionary, like emerald ash borer is here, we got to do something. But let's take away the reactionary and let's try to be more progressive, I guess, and start thinking about other species that might need help. Let me go to the next slide too. So again, we'll provide this. So again, we do a 2-day in the field training sessions with communities, and then communities from across the country. We've run 4 so far. We have 2 more this winter where communities will come to our lab and spend a full week, because we would love communities to become self-sufficient in their seed needs, and we're just going to be the backup to communities. So any seed that's sent to us, it's owned by the communities, and it's their seed to go back onto their lands. We can go to the next slide. I'm trying to rush to keep this on time. And I think if you click one more, this is sort of a map of Canada, the communities we're currently working with. So all these communities are coming in that are red. We've visited in the last year and a half. And the program is really catching on. We haven't approached any community. This is all word of mouth and media releases. So when a community approaches us, so all the gray dots there are communities who have reached out in the last couple of months looking for support. So that's what my staff, and my staff, it's myself, and I have 16 dedicated staff members who are sort of helping to cross the country and share and learn with communities on what we know when it comes to seed conservation. Ta-da! Yeah.
Thanks, Donnie. It's so inspiring to hear about what's happening north of the border. Yeah, and I feel like communities here can do similar things to start collecting seed and sending them into storage south of the border. So thanks for the inspiration. I'm just going to exit out of the full screen of the PowerPoint. Or yeah, okay, next slide. Next, I wanted to just open it up to anyone in the audience today who may be also taking actions to protect ash across Wabanakig. I know that in the Google registration form, some folks mentioned wanting to share updates. So we have about 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes to share anything in this. I hope that folks will step up if you've been doing work. I see Wild Seed Project is present, and I know that you had a recent education event, so be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nell. I'm from Wild Seed Project. And I'm excited to just like touch on a little bit about the the collaborations we've been able to do with some of the schools and with GMRI. And there's been, I'm speaking more from the like youth oriented education spaces, but it's been really like exciting, and we've learned a lot from how we like are telling stories about place, how we are re-understanding our own like relationship to plants, and what responsibility looks like when we're thinking about large scale conservation efforts, and the way that we are going about that. So yeah, it's been really cool, and we were able to collect a small amount of seed from some green ash this fall, and are excited to like expand, yeah, at least in southern Maine, what's happening with both the ash inventorying, which has been so great, and I'm so grateful to GMRI for leading that, and like pair that with seed collecting, and getting that into a like a longer term plan of how seeds are becoming the future trees of our forests. So that was kind of vague, but I know Emily, I don't know if Emily is still on the call, but she might have more to add.
Thanks, Nell. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Yeah, it's just great to have
Great.
more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Joanne, I see that you have your hand raised if you want to unmute.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanne Garton from Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, and I just had a question. Not exactly sure who it's to, and it might be to a whole bunch of people, but we are working on a plan in Vermont to both treat black ash on state lands. There's been a little bit of that done, but not too much, but also think seriously about black ash seed collection. And I was just wondering, I guess I'll say in Maine generally, but maybe like more related to University of Maine, how many sites are you already organized to collect seed at? Or how many have you already collected seed at? We're just trying to imagine scale, and we're kind of at the beginning of the process. So again, I'm not exactly sure who should answer that, but that was my question for the group.
I can just say that, you know, this whole year really has been built around developing the capacity to collect seed, and so when it's ready or producing seed, that we'll be able to collect seed. So we're really kind of in building that relationship with the goal of having seed collected at diverse places in Maine, and hopefully New England, with that genetic diversity with our seed collection efforts. So that's our goal. The land trust community has really been an important piece that you heard from the Scarborough, but again, other land trust groups have been starting their inventory, and plus with the tribal communities as well. So we're in pockets in different parts of the state where we've actually collected a little bit of seed this year, but in the coming years, we're hoping to collect more seed in different places, and again, looking to really have some geographic scale and mapping those out so that we know where we're collecting seed and we're collecting that genetic diversity. So we're really kind of in those beginning stages, Joanne, here in Maine. And this was really kind of the launch year for our efforts. I don't know, APCAW grad students, if you have anything else to add?
I would just say I worked a little bit on developing a map of priority areas for seed collection in Maine. And one of the pieces that we looked at was ecoregion. If the ecology is diverse, then the ash genetics are likely diverse. So if you can get your hands on one of those Forest Service maps, you could probably pinpoint areas where you could potentially collect seeds. So like John said, it's a matter of reaching out to different geographies and finding partners to work with. But at this point, so early on, it's really like as many people as you can organize as possible.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I'll open it up again if anybody has any other updates to share. If not, we can move on to some of the questions that were submitted and then maybe start tackling some questions in the chat. So if you're thinking of questions, start putting them in the chat, or you can raise your hand a bit down the line.
Ella, there are some people, I know Joanne said she's in Vermont. There are some other Vermont agencies or groups that are on the call. If you would like to talk about what's going on in your state, if you're from New Hampshire, Vermont, or elsewhere, feel free to join in the conversation. We are excited to hear what's going on in the region more than just in Maine.
Yeah, I see Nancy has your hand raised.
Yeah, hi, I think Joanne kind of already covered it, but just so you know, we're in the process of sending in an application for Forest Service funding to start looking at seed collection, as well as trying to find ways to implement also ash pounding workshops, as well as finding locations to store splints and to store logs, and so that we can process splints down the road. So as Joanne also said, we were able to inject about 38 trees on a wildlife management area this last year. It's the only place on the state land so far that we've been able to protect, but we are looking at perhaps our goal is to identify at least one area in each county in Vermont on state land to identify a location for ash injection. So that's kind of where we're at. We're in the beginning stages of getting that grant together. And as Joanne also mentioned, you know, we're looking at seed collection, and I know that Wild Seed is and folks in Maine may be able to help us out with storing the seed once we figure out how to actually get it collected. So stay tuned. We'll be in touch, and certainly, if you have any advice, we're behind you by several steps, and hoping to catch up soon. The ash borer is really nailing our trees here pretty quickly, particularly where it's the most dominant in the islands. But it's just been great having APCAW here, really leading the charge, and really appreciate all the work that you've been doing.
Nancy, could you just let us know which group you're from again?
Oh, I'm sorry. So I work with the Forest Parks and Rec. So yeah, I'm a county forester, Vermont Forest Parks and Rec.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And another update from Vermont in the chat, Caitlin says that Vermont Land Trust, TNC, and other nonprofit partners are creating groves of ash on lands owned by these nonprofit entities to conserve genetic diversity, and that they'd also be interested in seed collection. So yeah, this is a great conversation. And I also there was a question earlier about collecting DNA samples from ash, and we highly recommend that you check out the webinar given by Jill Hamilton that APCAW hosted in June. It's on our YouTube channel to learn more about the DNA collection process for ash and the exciting research that they're doing all down at Penn State to map black ash genetics and other types of ash. which is an important precursor for identifying resistance. So that's really exciting work.
And I also see Jennifer's question about DNA samples or DNA collection versus seed collection. And some of the seed is being used in the DNA analysis work that Penn State's doing, but they're also taking leaf tissue samples and bud tissue samples to do that work, and have found ways to do that, especially when we don't have great seed years like this past year. So a lot of what APCAW has contributed to that project has been leaf tissue samples and not seed, just because we came on when the seed year had already gone by, and hopefully we find ourselves in another good seed year and we can collect seed for all these other uses that we've talked about during our other webinars.
Thank you, Tyler.
Brooke Fleischman, apparently, did you have something you wanted to say? I got a message.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand for some
No
reason.
worries.
But yeah, so I'm with the Intervale Conservation Nursery here in Vermont. I also work really closely with partners across the state. I started this January creating more coordinated efforts towards seeds in Vermont. So ash isn't on our target list at the moment, but I know when another bumper crop comes around, we're definitely going to be making efforts towards that, and looking forward to any more collaboration in the future with you all. I appreciate you creating this forum for everybody.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. That's great. We look forward to staying in contact. And just on seed collection too, there are a lot of great resources on our website about how to do seed collection. That Emily Francis, who's moderating the chat a bit, made a seed collection manual that I highly recommend you check out. And that also talks about different options for storage, which you as individual organizations can weigh depending on what your needs are and where you want seed to go, including research or to tribal nurseries or into long-term storage. So highly recommend you check that out.
There will be an updated version of that document coming out in the near future. There probably won't be major changes to the methodology, but just cleaning up the actual document to make it easier to read and use. So just be aware of that. Any new updates to that will be announced on the website, and you'll be able to find a new version of that there when that occurs.
Great. Well, it's exciting to hear all the updates from the group on the call today. Thanks for sharing, everybody. And now I wanted to shift into talking through some of the questions that were submitted through the registration form. And I'll call on various people to answer these questions. And if we have time at the end, we could also move into more of an open Q&A as well. So these, I imagine that these would be best answered by Mike or Colleen at the Maine Forest Service. The first question is, what are the best practices for control of EAB without harming the tree or surrounding area?
Yeah, hi. So I did see that question, and I guess I'm not sure how these were submitted. Yeah, I wasn't sure kind of with the phrasing about the harming the tree or surrounding area. So I guess I'll take it in a few ways. I mean, if we're talking about individual trees, as far as, you know, what you can do to protect them without harming the tree itself, and neighboring trees, I mean, there are viable insecticide treatments available for emerald ash borer now, so that's always an option. If we're talking about monitoring, yeah, I guess I'm not sure exactly how it's phrased. So, I mean, yeah, kind of, there's no silver bullet for control. One of the more effective things would be that insecticide treatment on a limited basis. But for the big picture, kind of the best thing we can do is just kind of stay aware of things, monitor EAB, know where it is, and just be ready to react. So it doesn't, get out of, control too quickly, I guess I would say. I'm not sure if that answers it.
And maybe I would add to that prevention is way, way more effective than reacting afterwards. And so obeying, and complying with quarantine regulations and best management practices, even within a quarantine area, to slow down the spread is probably the best thing you can do, because that will buy you time before EAB gets to your area for more research to be done. And time is really valuable. So prevention is worth a lot more than cure, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one way that you can engage in that is by monitoring. And one person asked the question, if we think that we have emerald ash borer, what should we do and who should we contact?
Yeah, kind of depends on where you are. I mean, if you think back to my maps, I mean, we're very, definitely paying close attention to, looking for emerald ash borer in new locations within the regulated area, and especially outside the regulated area. So, you can always get in touch with the Maine Forest Service regardless. You can go directly to us, foresthealth@maine.gov, where we do have a direct line. You can also do bug watch. And I guess, the response you'll get will kind of differ on where you are. Like if you're in Southern York County, that's, thoroughly infested with EAB. Yes, we're keeping track of new points and stuff, but, at that point, we're not really offering much aside from advice. So you will want to, if you need trees removed and stuff like that, you will just want to go the traditional route of, reaching out to your local arborist or tree care professional and getting advice from them. We do maintain lists of both licensed arborists and pesticide applicators that serve different areas. So, if you're in one of those areas, you can always, find that list online. If you can't find it, again, reach out, we'll get it to you. We can kind of teach you how to use it so you can, create a short list of, tree care professionals in your area that can help you with your local situation. But yeah, definitely if you're in other areas, let us know. That's how we get most of our detections, honestly, despite the amount of work we do out there pounding the ground. We have so many things going on. A lot of the most valuable detections have come from the average homeowner or the arborists themselves doing, a treatment for a homeowner and realizing, oh, that's not on the map, and this is kind of a big deal. So yeah, just always err on the side of, if you're not sure, feel free to reach out to us, and I'll repeat the same thing, but we'd much rather, of course, know, okay, we have it there, we know it's there, than anything go unreported. So, foresthealth@maine.gov, anytime you're in doubt.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I'll put that link in the chat or in the follow-up resources, so that if folks can't find it, they can find it in the email that I send after this. So one of the questions was about APCAW's future plans to conduct ID and collection workshops for private landowners. And we're hoping and plan to conduct sort of a fused workshop with the Maine Land Trust Network in April that we hope you'll attend. Last time, I think about 40 people were able to come with us, so we'll probably have capacity for about 40 people. But I would also encourage you to, with your own organizations, maybe hold one of these workshops yourselves, or reach out to us to help you do that. So that's another idea to get the word out more. And that workshop that we're holding will be in Southern Maine. I think the person was specifically asking about Freeport. This training will be in Topsom, so it's pretty close by. So hope to see you there. And then we had sort of a more broad question, and I was thinking maybe John or Emily or Tyler could answer this, about APCAW. The question is, how many people are working on this project? Where should we start to protect the black ash? Save seeds or greenhouse plantation, etc. So there are a lot of different answers to that. So I'll open it up to the APCAW team to answer.
I can take a stab at it first. When it comes to being a private landowner, I think that the inventorying what you have is most important. One of the things that is talked about in the ash collection manual and what we've talked about in the past is that the ash that we're most concerned with is wild. We're not interested in nursery ash, nursery stock. So if you're interested in keeping the ash that's on your property that was planted there, maybe from came from an orchard or something like that, you have a right to protect that tree. But when it comes to seed, well, we're really concerned with collecting wild seed. So if you are a private landowner or have access to private land, I think I would recommend inventorying the property that you have, finding out what you have on your property, and then observing what you have for seed for those big bumper years, and we're hoping that we'll have another one here pretty soon. John, did you want to continue that?
Yeah. Well, right now we have, 3 dedicated great grad students that are really the core besides myself when we think about the APCAW program here at the University of Maine. But I think what's important is the relationships that we've built with, the Wild Seed Project, the land trust groups, and just growing that network of folks who we can work with and kind of continue the work, because this is really kind of a long-term effort that's going to be required, that will kind of hopefully kind of continue into future years with support and work together. And it will probably go in different phases, as we're going along. I can easily see seed collection rate is one of our top priorities while we can collect seed. But other facets, I think are going to be coming up, and I've already started in terms of thinking about utilizing that seed, propagating that seed, and having kind of community gardens where we might have ash trees being produced and maybe distributed out in the landscape. But again, that's gonna take another whole mindset, right? Because a lot of people probably, what are you doing planting live ash trees, back in places where it can be attacked by EAB? And so there's going to be some work that's going to be required for that, particularly with efforts where that work is necessary, particularly with lingering ash and trying to produce those ash trees that might be resistant to EAB. And how you do that process is actually replanting and exposing that to EAB and seeing the reaction and so forth. So that will be part of it. Again, kind of long-term, I think, commitment. And I think related to that is just, again, building those partnerships and the research that's being done in terms of illustrating the cultural importance, as well as the ecological roles that brown ash and other ash trees play in our forest environment, that hopefully garners that interest from private landowners and other folks that want to take action to try to protect those ash trees. And that's going to be kind of a continued effort that I think is going to need to keep moving forward, kind of keep building this momentum as we go forward. Tyler, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, our tribal nation partners are a big part of our work too. Tribal trust lands are only a small portion of the entire state, but the efforts that they're putting forth should go as a precedent and to show what a critically important cultural resource it is to the indigenous peoples of this region. And I think it's all about the community. So if we're building a bigger community, more people are going to be talking about ash, and why it's important and why we should do this sort of work. And the more people that reaches, the more of these private landowners that, scattered across the entire state, make up greater than 89% of the land base in the state of Maine. And then outside of the state of Maine and all of the region of Wabanagig, private land ownership, we can only talk about this so much, but if they hear the message enough, then the hope is that people will maybe look at managing these forests a little bit differently. How can we make a situation where there's a higher likelihood of keeping ash on the landscape? The only way to do that is to keep talking about it. So events like this, I like the youth events. I really like the idea of getting it in front of youth, and they're going to be the next generation to say, well, why aren't there ash trees here? We should have done something different here, or maybe they'll be involved earlier and make changes before Emerald Ash Borer gets there. So that's, I think, the value of the work that we're doing and this larger sense of community around ash preservation that's happening. So.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Those are great answers to everything. And sort of speaking of cultural importance, which you mentioned, Tyler, we had a few questions about who the best person to contact is if they think that they found a stand of brown ash that basket makers may want to use. And I will say, we at APCAW recently made a reporting form where if you find brown ash on your land and want to share it with basket makers, you can report it through this form that I'm gonna paste in the chat. Or you can just reach out directly to us. We have a network of basket makers who we're in contact with, and we can relay the message. But that's really valuable and generous to perpetuate the cultural practice. So thank you. And Tyler, do you want to give any updates on that process?
I think there's been, historically, the way that harvests on private lands occurred is that you'd have like a handshake agreement with a basket maker and a private landowner. And so, what we're hoping to do with this form, in which landowners can fill out and say that they're interested in facilitating a harvest of brown ash trees, is to get that information over to tribal forestry and natural resource staff, who would then disseminate it to basket makers in the community and ash harvesters to then start that conversation. That way we're not creating situations where not everybody's getting the information that should have an opportunity to reach out, and we're still creating a relationship between a basket maker and a landowner. It's not a detached thing, so that landowner knows who's coming onto the land to take those trees and what they're using it for, and they don't go into a space to harvest a tree and think that it's a risky situation where they don't know who's going to come out and say, what are you doing here? So we just want to make sure we're facilitating that connection as best we can.
Great, thanks, Tyler. And somebody else asked about the data collection sheet that was based off of Tyler's inventory work that you can use when you're out in the field to collect that important data about brown ash. And I'm also pasting that in the chat for folks to use. It's on our website under ash inventory, but hopefully that can be useful. And I'm just looking through all the other questions. I think we've covered pretty much all of the submitted questions, so we have about 10 minutes left. If there are any questions that anybody on the call wants to ask while we're all here. And if you want to ask a question, you can either raise your hand or drop it in the chat.
While you might be submitting a question or raise your hand, I want to just take this opportunity now just to thank all the speakers that presented today for a very informative session, very inspiring. And I just wanted to share that this past weekend at the University of Maine, they had the Wabanaki Winter Art Show, which is one of the largest gatherings of Wabanaki artists that happens really throughout the year at this Winter Art Show. And it was really inspiring to see all the artists this past weekend, not just, basket makers, jewelry artists, other kind of artists, but it was just, they had ash pounding and other events around basket making. The whole event is kind of organized by the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance. And very, very inspiring, just like the talks I heard today and actions that are being taken here and reported. It was just also just inspiring to see all the artists this past weekend, lots of basket makers. So the work that's being done is just so important, just kind of reinforced the importance of all the work that we're doing, I guess, this past weekend.
Yeah, and if folks want to check out the work that artists made, if you Google Wabanaki Winter Market, there's a list of different artists, and that list links to their website. So if you're doing any last minute holiday shopping, that's a great place to look.
Yeah.
I'm seeing one more question in the chat. Has anyone gotten EAB ash messaging into property tax bills? Might be a question for the state. I'm not sure the answer to that.
I don't think that's anything that we have done yet.
I think Jocelyn probably has something specific in mind, so I don't know if is the crowd able to unmute? Maybe Jocelyn can just I'm sure she has an angle she's thinking of.
Hi there. I think I'm unmuted.
Yep, we hear you, Jocelyn. Yeah.
Okay. I just, it's just an idea that popped into my head that, if we could put some information into the property tax bills that go around to homeowners, and maybe if they get involved, I mean, it would be great if they got involved in the efforts. If they find ash, maybe there could be some effort to even give them a little, $25 discount or something per year, or I don't know, or ask them if they want to make a contribution to this effort as well, because I think the more we reach out to, and I just want to tell the group, I'm really inspired by all of this and the educational things, and I'm hoping to move with volunteers. I've done a little bit of educational things at special events and with our campgrounds, but want to get volunteers involved and really helping out at all the state parks and things like that. But just throwing that question out there. I didn't know if other states might be doing it.
You're thinking like a blanket outreach tool, like regardless, because there's no information about tree ownership and any of that stuff that I'm aware of, right? So just be one way to reach literally every person. Kinda?
Yeah, everybody, every landowner in the state would get some information in there. Would have to coordinate with all the various towns, I guess, but
yeah, I mean, we do a lot of outreach directly to the municipalities. We have these quarterly meetings and stuff, so it'd be nice if there was additional dissemination of information on top of that, versus having to go from one extreme to the others. But no, I'm not sure that anything like that has happened, but it is an interesting idea.
Well, thank you. Thanks for letting me ask the question. And
Yeah.
great work, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's what these gatherings are supposed to be for, is just this generation of new ideas. So I think it's a great idea, and maybe one that we should follow up on. And Tyler, I like your idea in the chat. So thanks for raising that, Jocelyn. So if there are no other questions or comments, I can give you all 4 minutes back in your day. I just really want to express a ton of gratitude to all the speakers who came on. I'm feeling inspired and re-energized in this work. So I really appreciate everybody who came out to listen today and also to share. And we hope to see much more of this in the new year. Hopefully it'll be a better seed year, but yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.